gentlemen, good day, and welcome to yet another edition of Soul Talk. Soul Talk, as you're aware, is a program in which we talk to mainstream leaders about their values, their beliefs, their influences, and those inspiring role models that have brought them to their level of excellence. Today, we have an extremely gifted individual to talk with. Poet, writer, playwright, scholar, activist, actor, director. He is a multifaceted master of the creative arts. He is also one of India's contemporary leading literary voices. Welcome, Girish Karnad.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vikram. Nice to be here.
Over 12 plays, 10 numerous awards, many creative and literary achievements, and yet you grew up in Mathuran, in a Maharashtra.
I was only born in
Mathura, Maharashtrian speaking area. Then you moved to Dharwad for your graduation, then which again was in English. Then you did a master's. You were a Rhodes Scholar, and you went to the Oxford for your master's in philosophy, politics, and economics. Again, all in English, and yet you chose to write all your prolific literature in Kannada. Tell us all about that.
Well, let me first make one or two corrections. I'm not a poet, unfortunately. I wish I was a poet, and I had a heartbreak when I suddenly realized that I can't write poetry. This was the age of about 22, because that's what I always wanted to do. To answer your question as to why I write in Kannada, it was I did my schooling in Kannada, and I was in Sirsi for a long time, which is a Kannada-speaking area. I was in Dharwad for a long time, which is a Kannada-speaking area. And although my medium of instruction in college was English, one continued to read and write in Kannada. But the interesting thing is, when I wrote my first play, it came out in Kannada. That's it. Till that moment, I thought I was going to be a poet, and a poet in English. And that's why I said, I wanted to go abroad. I want to settle down in England and be, after Eliot, Yeats, Girish Karnad,
Tell me, when you were a growing boy, you were impressed with street theatre, village theatre, I understand. Did you always know your direction? Or did it happen much later?
No. I was fascinated by theatre. There's no question at all, because there were two kinds of theatre that I grew up in. One was the touring company theatres, which were popular in those days, which my parents had seen in Marathi in its heyday, Bal Gandharv and others, about which I had heard. And then there was a folk play, Yakshagana and so on, which I saw. Both of which acted upon my mind, I suppose. But I loved them. To me, every time I think of my childhood, it's the theatre. But I didn't at that time think I would go into theatre. I didn't think of anything. I just loved it.
Creative arts as well? Were you asked to be a doctor or an engineer?
I wanted to be an IAS officer. And my father wanted me to be an IAS officer, because he always felt that was the ultimate in life. You became an IAS officer, you had achieved it. He came from a rather poor class, this lower middle class, and to him security was very important. And I think he was heartbroken when I realized that I was not going to do IAS and went abroad instead.
So your choice of a literary career has been a great loss to our bureaucratic structure, I would imagine.
Well, as I said, it just happened. One day I just wrote a play, and I wrote it in Kannada, and there was such conviction in my writing there that I knew I was not a poet, because I wrote poetry with great effort, and each poem took. But this play, Yayati, just poured out.
But your stint at Rhodes, which was around the time you were inspired to write Yayati.
After.
Yes, I know. But the process of creative churning must have started while you were there. Because you wrote that in 61. And you
60 to 63. I wrote this in 60.
Yes.
The point is, I wrote this play when I was still in India before going. And I showed it to a Kannada publisher who returned it to me. And then when I was in England, I thought of putting it into English. I couldn't. I just couldn't rethink the play into English. And suddenly I got a letter one day from my publisher saying, please send it to me, I'll publish it. And I did.
You're on record to saying that when you wrote Yayati, you felt as if you were a chosen scribe, as if there was, your pen was moving, there was a mystical inspiration to write this mythological drama. How did that happen?
The process was just an ecstatic process. It just poured out. I could see them on stage, and I was like a stenotypist, writing down whatever they were saying. It's a process which I have never been able to recapture again. After that, playwriting has always been rather difficult, but the first play, it just came out. One of the reasons why I think it happened is that after Sirsi and so on, the place I went to school in is a place called Sirsi in Karnataka, which had no electricity. So one or two ramshackle cinema houses. But I saw a lot of theatre, and because there was no electricity, the day used to come to an end very early. And children used to get together and tell each other stories. At home, you were told stories. There were grandmothers telling stories. If a teacher didn't come, one of us was made to tell stories. We lived in an atmosphere where stories just filled the air. And many of them were, of course, Pauranic stories, stories of gods and epics and so on. So I think it was just there sitting inside me, and I hadn't realized it was there. And I tapped it and it came.
How did Tughlaq happen?
I had written Yayati, it had been received well. My publisher was saying, give me another play. I didn't know what to write. And I read a book of Kannada criticism in which the critic, a famous critic called Kirtinath Kurtkoti, wrote that in Kannada there are no good historical plays. That Kannada playwrights don't know how to write history meaningfully, that we have nothing equivalent to, Richard III, say. And I said, why not? So I took up a textbook of history, went through it from page 1, Mohenjo-daro I started, and went on reading. And when I came to Tughlaq, I said, that's it, that's an interesting character. Now I must work on it. And then I was at Oxford, and I worked solidly. I collected facts. I read every book on Tughlaq. I read Barni, I read Ibn Battuta, I read contemporary writers, collected facts, and wrote the play.
Earlier growing years, the parental influences.
The main influence on me, looking back on my career, was their passion for theatre. They loved theatre. And my father had worked in the old Bombay state, so he had worked in Bombay, he had worked in Sindh, he had seen the old Parsi theatre, he remembered all the adaptations of Othello and so on. He had seen the Urdu plays done. My mother had seen Bal Gandharv, she used to mimic him and so on. So in our house, right from childhood, there was this feeling that theatre is an enjoyable and valuable experience. And I was seeing plays all the time.
And it was an essential part of your dining room conversation, so that in some way would have influenced you to proceed in that direction.
And my father was a doctor. He was a lower division doctor. So whenever these actors used to come to a place like Sirsi, which was a malarial place in those days, famous as a punishment post, among the people invited to the play, one was a doctor, free of charge. There was, of course, the Mamlatdar and the police officer. They all got free passes too. And my father was one of them. And so we all got free passes. It was the done thing. Now it seems quite horrendous that we all went and saw play after play after play without paying for it. But that was the style. But the net result was that I saw lots of plays, and I knew the actors, and theatre got into my blood without my realizing it.
So after your return from England, you joined the Oxford University Press.
Yes.
And the success of Yayati and Tughlaq then spurred you on to be a full-time playwright.
I wasn't a full-time playwright ever. I worked with Oxford University Press for 7 years, which was a great experience because, then you're in touch with books. While I was there, I wrote Hayavadana. What happened is, at the end of 7 years, I got the Homi Bhabha Fellowship, which allowed me 2 years to go and study folk theatre. During that time, the idea of Hayavadana came. I wrote the play, so it was a very conscious decision to write a folk play because I felt that aspect of our heritage had not been used. People were still doing drawing room plays all the time, and to have music in theatre was considered absolutely, not acceptable and so on. So I said, why not? So I wrote Hayavadana and so on. And then came a long gap when I got into Hindi films and so on. When I wrote plays, but not very good ones. And
well, you acted in a few Hindi films. I've seen you romancing a few Bollywood heroines with some deft ease.
Yes. Well, there was always pressure on me to sort of, to go and act in Hindi films. But the fact remains that I proposed to my wife, and I said to her, I hope you have money. She is a doctor in America. She said, no, but she said, I thought you had money. So I said, oh my God, I don't have money. I must make money now. And I got into Hindi films to make money. And then I pursued money quite single-mindedly for the next few years.
I understand it was only as a means to be able to be a serious playwright.
There were a few films which one thinks back with pleasure. I'll always enjoy working with Shyam Benegal, for instance. I'll always enjoy Swami, Manthan. There were a few stunt films which turned out to be great fun. There were a few moments, but I was not a confirmed actor.
how did this sort of gradual journey and metamorphosis to so many different aspects of the creative arts happen?
I was very lucky to be a part of my generation. Let me put it this way. I think my whole generation was lucky because I was 10 when India became independent. And by the time I was 20, 25, opportunities were opening out. You know, my return to India was a great stroke of luck, really. I missed my first class at Oxford just by a small margin, and you know, I felt tragic. But looking back, that was the luckiest thing to have happened, because then I came back home, and anyway I was writing in Kannada, and you know, India was just opening out. There was in film, Satyajit Ray had just come, you know, 54, 55, Pather Panchali, the whole exciting thing. In the 60s, Alkazi had started.
There was a cultural renaissance.
The complete renaissance with independence, culture was being looked at, there was money. Television hadn't yet come, mind you. So that, you know, evenings, the people were willing to come and see what you're doing. And 20, 25 years of absolute, you know, I let rip, actually.
But you had great success as a playwright. Several of your plays were translated into the English language. They've been performed by leading international companies in the West. And yet, it seems that you have deliberately, psychologically distanced yourself from doing anything among the international milieu and chosen deliberately to write upon the Indian milieu.
Theatre is always for a specific rooted audience. You know, it does not transfer well. Tom Stoppard is now considered a great, you know, very important playwright in England. But, you know, none of his plays would work here, I think. You know.
Well, they've tried. But
they've tried, but they don't. I mean, they've tried it in English. They wouldn't work it in regional languages, you see. Some plays do. I mean, Lorca travels. Lorca's plays do go down well. But no. So the reason is ultimately theatre is aimed at a particular culturally rooted audience. And you've got to remember to write for that audience. Otherwise, it's not...
And are you a very fulfilled playwright?
Well, I've been very lucky because of the period. You know, my plays have been done by some of the best directors in India of the period. You know, it was done by Satyadev Dubey, Alkazi, you know, Shaman Anjalan, Alec Padamsee.
Mention them in English.
Yes, and some of the best actors of the period have acted in my plays. So I couldn't have asked for more theatre-wise. You know, everyone from Om Shivpuri to Nasiruddin Shah, and you know, they've all acted. And yes, I think I have been very fortunate. This may be a historical accident also, because in the 50s and the 60s there was a great deal of cooperation between people. We all used to, you know, translate. I translated Tendulkar, I translated Badal Sarkar, you know, things like that.
But you never lived in Bombay at any given period of time, which was then...
When I decided to go into Hindi films, I did.
You did for a while.
Then I was there for...
And your wife Saraswati was with you at that stage?
No, then we got married.
Oh, it was
once I thought I had enough money, we got married. And then she came.
And you have 2 children?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
So are they following their parental influences?
No, absolutely. There are no parental injunctions. As I said, whether in religion or in life, we have not told them, you know, I hope we have been good parents. That's all we can say. That's for them.
Because you've been a very private person. You have kept a certain boundary about your private life. Is that again deliberate choice?
Absolutely. I didn't want to expose. I didn't want the fact. I knew I was in a medium which was very glamorous and can get exposure. I didn't want my children to be.
But you stayed away. You shied away from publicity because you are again on record to say that it interferes with the creative process.
Also, I didn't want it to impinge on my children. I wanted them to grow up as normal children, where they saw me as a person who went and, you know, earned money and came back. And I kept saying, just because my photograph is on the poster, don't think it's... So
you encouraged them to make their own choices?
They have all gone into different things.
And made their own choices. So you didn't nurture them. You don't think children need nurturing and they make the wrong choices?
We nurtured them to be independent.
You nurtured them.
Yes, I think.
So would you call yourself a fulfilled and successful parent?
Well, let me say this. My daughter is a doctor. She's 25, 26 in England. My son is a journalist here. And they come home for their holidays. So I suppose I would, you know, they have the independence to go anywhere in the world. They have the means also. But they come and spend some time with me and my wife. So I suppose they enjoy being with us.
The sense I get from you is that there is a strong sense of activism within you, which you have deliberately restrained.
I have not restrained it at all. In fact, I have been very active in certain kind of politics. I have always felt that I have been very fortunate in the kind of honors I've got, awards I've got, recognition I've got, and therefore I owe it to my country that I participate in issues that matter to me, and certainly in the whole question of communalism and communal politics. And I have been very active, and I've had stones thrown at my windows smashed. All that's happened to me. I've had police sitting in front of me to protect me from goons and so on. But I really feel that secularism is the great legacy that we have, and we need to fight for it. It's very sad that in the last 10-15 years it's got weakened, and there have been forces which have eaten away at it and made the country a dangerous place. And I would certainly fight to maintain it.
But are there other issues beyond that? Environmental degradation?
I have. I mean, there I have not taken the lead. I've certainly got, certainly in freedom of expression, like what happened in Sayajirao University, recently the goons coming into the MS Baroda school,
yes.
and, wrecking the art exhibition and so on. No, that kind of thing one has protested, gone out, or, the hounding of Hussain.
Yes.
That goes on. No, that kind of issues certainly they upset one.
Tell us about Broken Images and the wedding album.
The Broken Images is really, when I came back from England, I was there for 2 or 3 years working for the government of India as a culture minister. And I came back, and I suddenly, coming to Bangalore, I was suddenly struck by how much the image mattered today in our life. Everywhere there were images, there were electronic images, there were posters, but all kinds of things. But essentially, the TV image, the video image, and I felt that these images were shaping our own idea of ourselves. And Broken Images is really about a woman who becomes internationally famous by writing in English, the question that you asked, an international celebrity, and suddenly is cross-examined by her own television image. So that's
and wedding album is
wedding album is something that I have been writing for a long time. It's only about a wedding in the family, and the pressures that work.
Did you not find that cinema is more powerful a medium? Did you didn't feel like doing more work as a director?
Ultimately, it's a question of conviction. If you said to me, when I look at any of the films I have done, I notice so many things that are wrong. I feel no, I didn't do that. I didn't. But with my plays, even with the Ayati, when I read it, I feel that's good. Actually, it's not bad. I mean, for a 22-year-old, I had a good sense of how to write a play. So that kind of confidence that you are at something that you're good at, I don't get in films. I've made films. I don't get that with my acting either. I've acted.
But the experience of being an actor, the experience of being a director would have helped you evolve as a better playwright.
Yes. Infinitely, because films teach you to be brief. Films teach you to cut. Because editing is the ultimate, the vocabulary.
Tighter.
Your scenes tighter, and when you've said all that you need to say, to cut to something else, cut to another scene, quickly get on with it. Oh yes, the impact of films on my plays is enormous, I would say.
And you mentioned earlier that for you, playwriting is hard work. It's not that you get a brilliant idea and you have to work hard at producing a play.
Yes, I have worked for 35 years on my Fire and the Rain. The idea struck me when I was in my 20s, and I wrote the play about 10 years ago. And I was working all the time. I was trying to find out how one could do it, how one could weave into it, what are the possibilities. Because the marvelous thing about theatre is its limitations. Because you have to say everything you say in 2 hours. In fact, nowadays it's even less, say 90 minutes. And within that 90 minutes, if you have bored the audience will get up and go. And even our muscles of our bottom, can't take very long, so much longer. So there you are. And can you hold attention for those 2 hours? And can you say something significant? Those limitations I find extremely challenging.
And now even more difficult, because now you have television overtaking your entire mind attention.
Quite.
But there is this much is made of conflict between theatre and television. I still feel that television could also be a great medium to promote theatre.
Yes, and unfortunately, so much of our television is so bad that it doesn't stop.
It doesn't do that, but
doesn't stop people from coming.
But do you think that we could improve theatre through the medium of television?
Well, I don't know. The point is the fact that there is television in the West hasn't killed theatre. Theatre continues. how to make theatre prosper is another
Yes.
question. You know, we have to go into the mechanics of it. But the point is, in 19th century, there was only folk theatre. Then we got company theatres. Then in the 30s, we got films. You know, the number of, then, you know, came television, then there's video. And so the number of art forms is proliferating, and it's available, it's reaching further. And I don't regret that, because, you know, I think television and video goes to people who could never dream of coming to theatre, who couldn't afford theatre, women, servants, people who are in bed, bedridden people, you know,
Yes.
menials. So, you know, and I think I wouldn't regret television at all, because they entertain people who had no entertainment before.
But you are, I can see that you still remain very involved with the physical interaction on stage.
Oh, yes.
You feel that's an exciting process.
That's what makes theatre.
That's
what makes theatre.
And are you satisfied with where Indian theatre is today?
No, I'm not. That I'm not. Of
What-
course, we are
what-
going.
what
You see,
more
the
can-
only theatre, only language in which theatre is really alive today is Marathi. The sign of a theatre which is alive, I would say two signs. One is that young people should be writing plays, and young people should be watching plays. You know, both of which happens in Maharashtra, I find. This is not happening in Karnataka, and it's happening even less in other languages.
But you've been fairly aligned with the cultural forces in the country. You had a stint as the director of at the centre in London. What can the private-public partnership do to improve theatre in India?
Well, theatre, as I said, ultimately is rooted in a particular audience, and what makes theatre run in London is not the same thing that makes it run in Bombay, or would make it run in Dharwad. You know, in each case we have to look at it as a specific rooted problem and carry on.
Cultural vision for India in the future. What do you think those who aspire to be part of the cultural direction of this country, what is the message you have for the young
I
people?
think we have a most marvelous constitution. I think our constitution makers had a tremendous vision. Among all our neighbors, we are one country which has survived as democracy. I mean, you know, someone like Nehru could have become a dictator, who knows, but he didn't. We could have become a Hindu state, we didn't. I think we could have become a monolithic state, but the linguistic reorganization of India was a marvelous move. We are a federal, although it was not intended to be probably, and a very a dynamic society. And I think we could go on. Unfortunately, all this, looking backwards, bringing up Hindu culture in the false name, trying to build up the religious intolerance for political reasons. And these are the people who are also wrecking the democratic framework of the country, which worries me. It's not the grassroots people that worry me. It's the people who do this, and these kind of people are educated politicians who should know better.
But there must be some people from your culture, contemporary milieu, with whom you're satisfied, whom you feel have contributed to the richness of your own creativity. Are there any?
Oh, I have been so fortunate. The number of people I've worked with, as I told you, in film Shyam Benegal, Vijay Tendulkar, to have a colleague like Vijay Tendulkar, Badal Sarkar, or to have acted with a person called Shabana Azmi or Smita Patil.
What is the future for Girish Karnad that we can look forward to?
I hope for something better, that I'll come up with something better than what I've done so far, that's all. One always is looking to the next thing.
And the idea of writing something with the global milieu does still not excite you?
One may. There is no such thing as it doesn't.
Because I know the world is integrating.
No, you see, because anything can happen. That's the thing. And one should allow it to happen. One should allow the alternatives to come up and, give one a choice.
It's been a pleasure, Girish, to have you on Soul Talk.
For me too. Thank you.
And I hope the audience enjoyed listening to Mr. Girish Karnad as much as I enjoyed talking to the master of the creative arts.